Let me ask you something. And I want you to answer honestly. Why do you keep waking up every day feeling like nothing's changing? Why do you say you want more, but keep running the same patterns, thinking the same thoughts, and settling for the same results? You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not even stuck. You're just addicted to the familiar. Your comfort zone has become your identity. You've mistaken repetition for reality, and worst of all, you've convinced yourself that this is just the way life is. But I'm here to rip that lie out of your mind today. Because the truth is, everything you want is on the other side of everything you're afraid to feel. And if you don't break free from the patterns that feel safe but keep you small, you will repeat the same year of your life again and again and call it a decade. You say you want change? Then listen closely, not with your ears, but with your soul. Because what you're about to hear isn't just motivation. It's a wake-up call. It's the truth most people avoid their entire lives. And if you dare to face it, if you're willing to let go of the familiar, you won't just change your day, you'll change your destiny. Let's begin. You see, the biggest trap isn't failure, it's comfort. That's what keeps people from rising. That's what keeps you circling the same drain over and over again while convincing yourself you're being patient or waiting for the right time. Let me tell you something straight. You are not waiting. You are hiding behind routines, behind stories, behind the illusion that this familiar life is somehow safe. It's not safe. It's just known. There's a big difference. Familiarity isn't safety. It's a cage with invisible bars. And the problem is when you live in that cage long enough, you stop seeing it. You just call it life. You wake up every day, go through the motions, do the same things, talk to the same people, think the same recycled thoughts, and you call it normal. And because it doesn't feel like pain, not the obvious kind, you tolerate it. You stay in that job that drains your soul. You stay in relationships that don't challenge or ignite you. You scroll, you numb, you delay, not because you don't want more, but because more lives outside the walls of what you already know. And stepping outside those walls, that triggers your fear. That threatens your illusion of control. That pokes the part of your brain wired to survive, not to thrive. And so instead of expanding, you shrink. You shrink to fit your environment. You shrink to match your past. You shrink because that feels easier than facing the unknown. But the unknown is not your enemy. It's your invitation. Everything you want, the passion, the purpose, the power, it all lives out there, beyond what's comfortable. Growth doesn't live inside what's easy. It lives inside what's unfamiliar. And you've got to be willing to give up the need to feel safe if you want to feel free. Because let's be honest, you're not really safe right now. You're just stuck in a routine that feels predictable. But predictability without progress, that's not life. That's slow death. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to just because it's familiar? What version of yourself are you clinging to because it doesn't rock the boat? What emotions, patterns, or excuses have you wrapped around yourself like a comfort blanket while your dreams die quietly in the corner? You've got to get honest, brutally honest. Most people won't. Most people will justify the familiar. They'll rationalize mediocrity. They'll say it's not that bad. But let me ask you this. When did not that bad become good enough for your life? If you want a new life, you need a new relationship with uncertainty. You gotta fall in love with discomfort. You gotta learn to breathe through fear, not run from it. Because the version of you that you're trying to become, they don't live in the familiar. They live in the unknown. And that version of you is waiting not for perfect conditions, not for some external permission, but for you to finally say, I'm done playing small. I'm done confusing comfort with peace. I'm done pretending I don't know what needs to change. The moment you step out of the familiar, your real life begins. The reason most people can't move forward isn't because they lack potential. It's because they're dragging the past around like a badge of identity. They don't even realize it. You want to grow? You want to change? You say you're ready for a new life, but every single day you wake up and automatically step back into the same mental costume you've been wearing for years. And here's the truth. You don't live according to your goals. You live according to your identity. Whatever you believe about who you are, that's the thermostat. That's the ceiling. That's what you'll unconsciously return to, no matter how hard you try to push forward. You've trained your mind, probably without even knowing it, to believe a certain story about yourself. And that story, it's been written by repetition, by trauma, by failure, by what you've survived, not what you're capable of. And as long as you keep rehearsing that same story, your identity will keep you chained to the familiar. It'll whisper things like, this is just how I am, or I've always been this way. And you'll nod along like that's the truth. But it's not the truth. It's just what's familiar. Let me break this down even deeper. You keep taking action from an outdated version of yourself. You're trying to change your life with the same mindset that created your problem. That doesn't work. That's like trying to upgrade the software of your life, but refusing to reboot the system. And guess what happens when you do that? The old bugs keep crashing everything. You might try something new for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, but then the old identity pulls you right back to the habits, the fears, the same level of thinking. It's not sabotage. It's your nervous system defending its programming. Because here's what most people never get. Your identity isn't just a concept. It's a physical pattern. It lives in your posture, your voice, your thoughts, your emotions. You've wired it in. That's why it feels so hard to change. Because every cell in your body has been conditioned to expect and create a certain version of reality. And if you don't interrupt that loop, your life will stay the same, even if you move to a new city, start a new job, or meet someone new. Why? Because you're still you, the same version, running the same software, repeating the same identity. You want to change your life? Then change the way you see yourself. You've got to tell the truth about the role you've been playing. Maybe you've been playing the victim. Maybe you've been playing small so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Maybe you've been hiding your power because deep down you're afraid of what it would mean to actually rise. Whatever it is, call it out. Rip the mask off. Because as long as you're still married to the old version of you, the new version can't come alive. One of them has to die. One of them has to go. Change begins the moment you say, I'm not that person anymore. Even if everything in your environment is still the same. Even if people around you doubt it. Even if your results haven't shown up yet. Identity doesn't shift when you see new results. It shifts when you decide to be someone different before the results arrive. That's real power. That's how you stop reliving the same day for the rest of your life. The identity that created your limits cannot be the one that leads you to your breakthrough. Isn't it crazy how people will stay in pain, not because they want to suffer, but because they've learned to live there? I've seen it 1,000 times. Maybe you have too. People stuck in toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, destructive habits. And when you ask them why they don't leave, they don't really have an answer. They just say things like, it's complicated, or I've been through worse, or it's not that bad. But here's the truth they're not admitting. They've gotten used to the pain. They've made it familiar. And what's familiar starts to feel like home. There's a strange comfort in pain when it's the only thing you've known. You see, the human nervous system is hardwired to associate familiar with safe. So even if that familiar pattern is filled with anxiety, stress, sadness, or shame, your body will cling to it because it knows how to survive it. It doesn't care if it's killing your spirit. It only cares that you've survived it before. That's the addiction. That's the trap. Your brain isn't looking for what makes you thrive. It's looking for what feels predictable. Predictable pain is safer than unpredictable growth. That's how your mind sees it. And if you don't break that pattern consciously, it becomes your default destiny. Now think about that. You've got people who wake up every single day in emotional suffering, and they don't leave because they've labeled that suffering as normal. Not because it's healthy, not because it's working, but because it's what they know. Because they've built their whole identity around that pain. And the scariest part, some people even start to feel pleasure from their pain. Not because it feels good, but because it gives them a sense of control, a sense of certainty, even a sense of identity. Let me give you something real. If you've been in pain long enough, it becomes a lens, a filter. And without realizing it, you start using that pain to interpret everything. You stop expecting good things to happen. You stop trusting people. You stop believing in yourself, not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to associate the unknown with danger. And so you cling to the pain, the relationship that doesn't serve you, the behavior that sabotages you, the job that drains you, not because it works, but because it's the devil you know. But here's what I want you to hear deep in your soul. Pain is not your home. It is not your identity, and it is not your destiny. You were not born to suffer. You were not built to endure a life that numbs you. You were made to rise. You were made to expand. But you will never rise as long as you're defending what's destroying you. And that's what most people do. They defend their limitations. They protect their pain, and they make excuses for the things they're afraid to let go of. You want a different life? Then you've got to be willing to feel something new. You've got to trade predictable pain for unfamiliar peace. You've got to risk discomfort to experience freedom. Because until you decide that the pain of staying the same is greater than the fear of change, nothing will move. Your life changes the moment you stop finding comfort in what's killing you. Let's get something straight. You don't just think your way into being stuck. You feel your way into it. You get emotionally conditioned to stay there. You get used to certain states. Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, doubt. And your body, your nervous system starts to treat those feelings as your baseline. They become your emotional home. And once you've lived in that home long enough, even if it's full of chaos and pain, you start to believe it's just who you are. But it's not who you are, it's who you've rehearsed being. Most people don't realize this, but you are addicted to your emotions the same way someone can be addicted to sugar or alcohol or chaos. Every time you repeat a thought like, I'm not good enough, or it always goes wrong for me, and then feel the shame or fear or sadness that thought creates, you're reinforcing a loop. Thought, emotion, behavior. Thought, emotion, behavior. And you run that pattern so often that your nervous system memorizes it. Now it doesn't even need the thought. Your body just goes straight into the feeling. You wake up already anxious, already tense, already bracing for disappointment before the day even begins. Why? Because your nervous system is trained for it. This is why change feels so hard. It's not just about breaking habits on the outside. It's about interrupting patterns on the inside. You're not just trying to do something different. You're trying to be someone different. And that version of you doesn't feel anxious all the time. That version of you doesn't shrink when things get uncomfortable. That version doesn't panic in silence or play small when the opportunity to grow shows up. But if your nervous system is conditioned for survival instead of success, it'll reject that version. It'll pull you back into what's familiar, because even if the familiar hurts, at least it feels safe. You've got to train your nervous system for new emotions, just like you train a muscle. And that starts with awareness. You have to notice when you're dropping into those old states, when your shoulders tense, when your chest tightens, when your breathing shortens. Don't just brush it off. That's not normal. That's programming, and you can't change what you're not willing to confront. But confronting it isn't enough. You've got to replace it. If your body knows how to live in stress, you've got to teach it how to live in calm. If it knows fear, you've got to introduce it to courage. And I'm not talking about faking it. I'm talking about feeling it, standing in it, until your system starts to learn that it doesn't need to panic every time something new shows up. Until your system starts to associate growth with safety instead of threat. This is the real work. Not just changing what you do, but changing what your body believes is possible. Because if your nervous system doesn't believe it's safe to expand, it will sabotage you every single time. You'll set goals, make promises, start routines, and then slip back. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because deep down your system is screaming, this isn't safe. Go back. Go back to what we know. And if you don't train it, if you don't intentionally disrupt that, you'll keep chasing breakthroughs while living in breakdowns. You'll keep thinking something is wrong with you, when really something is wrong with the patterns you've never rewired. Your breakthrough begins the moment you stop trusting the fear in your body more than the truth in your soul. People talk about the unknown like it's something to be afraid of. Like stepping into the unfamiliar means stepping into danger. But let me tell you something you already know deep down. The unknown is not what's dangerous. Staying the same is what's dangerous. Living a life on repeat, pretending you're fulfilled while you're secretly dying inside, that's what's dangerous. You want to talk about risk? There's no greater risk than waking up one day and realizing you've spent your entire life playing small because you were afraid of what might happen if you went all in. See, we've been conditioned to run from uncertainty. We're taught to chase predictability, to cling to structure, to build routines and call them safety. But you weren't born for routine. You were born to expand, to explore, to push boundaries. But the moment you try to step into something new, a new relationship, a new identity, a new business, a new way of living, that old voice in your head shows up and whispers, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if they judge me? And so you retreat, you shrink. You tell yourself it's not the right time, not the right place, not the right moment, and that becomes your cycle. But let me ask you something. What if the unknown isn't your enemy? What if it's your proving ground? What if that fear you feel isn't there to stop you, but to wake you up? What if your next level only reveals itself when you stop waiting for guarantees and start walking in faith? Because here's the truth. Nothing extraordinary has ever happened inside the comfort zone. Every great leap, every breakthrough, every evolution happens in the space where you don't have it all figured out. That's where life begins. That's where your real power lives. You got to stop labeling uncertainty as danger. Uncertainty is the birthplace of possibility. It's where you stop repeating the past and start creating the future. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's going to stretch you. It's going to force you to confront your excuses, your fears, your self-imposed limits. But that stretch, that moment when everything in you wants to pull back, that's the edge of transformation. That's the doorway. And most people turn around at that doorway. They let discomfort become a stop sign when it was always meant to be a green light. Let me give it to you straight. The life you want doesn't exist in what you already know. It exists in the places you haven't gone yet, the conversations you haven't had, the decisions you've been putting off. It exists outside your current story. And if you want to step into it, you've got to get comfortable with not knowing exactly how it's going to unfold. You've got to stop needing certainty before you move. Because if you wait until you're ready, you'll be waiting forever. You want to change your life? Then go where you've never gone before. Do what you've never done. Speak what you've never dared to say. Stand where you usually sit. Move when you normally freeze. Because in those moments, when you move into the unknown, not with fear, but with power, you stop living from memory and start living from vision. That's when you stop being who you've always been and become who you were always meant to be. Everything you've ever wanted is waiting for you just beyond the edge of what feels familiar. When people hear the word addiction, they immediately think of substances, alcohol, drugs, maybe sugar. But there's a much more dangerous kind of addiction, the one no one talks about. And it's the one that's keeping more people stuck than any chemical ever could. It's the addiction to your own story, that quiet, unconscious narrative that you keep telling yourself day after day, year after year, until it becomes your truth. You don't even hear it anymore, but it's running the show behind the scenes. You say things like, this is just how my life is. I've always struggled. People like me don't get ahead. I'm not good with money. I never follow through. I attract the wrong people. And the scariest part, you believe it. You don't question it. You don't challenge it. You just wear it like armor. And the more you repeat it, the deeper it gets wired into your identity. You may not realize it, but every time you say those things, even in your own head, you're reinforcing the very limitations you say you want to break. That's not just a bad habit, that's addiction. Because what is addiction really? It's something you keep returning to even when it hurts you. It's something that gives you short-term relief and long-term damage. And that's exactly what these stories do. They protect your ego in the moment. They give you a reason not to stretch, not to try, not to risk. But in the long run, they steal your future. They keep you small. They keep you predictable. They keep you from stepping into the version of yourself that scares the hell out of you, but also excites you more than anything else. And it goes even deeper than that. These stories aren't just random. They're emotionally charged. They're tied to pain, to failure, to shame, to trauma. And because your nervous system is wired to avoid that pain, you keep repeating the story to stay in control. You think, if I already expect to fail, I won't be disappointed. If I already believe people can't be trusted, I won't get hurt. You've built mental walls to keep yourself safe, not realizing those same walls have become your prison. And here's the brutal truth. No one's coming to tear those walls down for you. No one's going to show up and rewrite your story unless you do it yourself. At some point, you've got to look in the mirror and ask, whose story am I living? Is it the one your parents told you? Your past told you? That moment when you got rejected? That year you went broke? That time you failed and never fully forgave yourself? You've got to get honest about where your story came from. Because if you didn't consciously choose it, it's probably not serving you. And if it's not serving you, it's time to let it go. Yes, it will feel uncomfortable. Yes, it will feel like you're losing a part of yourself. That's what withdrawal feels like. That's what detoxing from limitation feels like. But on the other side of that discomfort is your power. On the other side is freedom. And the only way to get there is to stop feeding the lie. So the next time that voice shows up, the one that says you can't, you're not ready, it's too late, don't argue with it. Don't negotiate with it. Just recognize it for what it is. An old script written by fear, fueled by repetition, and enforced by comfort. And then make a decision, not a maybe, not a someday, a decision that you will no longer live your life addicted to a version of yourself you've outgrown. You don't need a new dream, you need a new story. Let me tell you something most people never figure out. You can't build a powerful life on top of a weak identity. You can't stack discipline, consistency, bold action, and massive goals on top of a belief system that tells you deep down you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy. Because eventually the cracks show. Eventually your outer habits crash into your inner wiring. And when that happens, the old identity always wins. Always. This is why people start strong and then fall off. It's not because they don't want it. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they haven't changed who they think they are. They're trying to live at a level of greatness their inner self-image doesn't support. And so the moment the pressure rises or life tests them, they fall right back, not to their goals, but to their identity. Because your identity is the thermostat of your, you can crank up the heat with new habits and exciting plans, but if the thermostat is still set to average, it'll pull you right back. That's how it works. You can't fake identity. You can fake motivation. You can fake positivity, but your nervous system knows the truth. It knows whether you believe you're a finisher or a quitter. It knows whether you truly see yourself as disciplined, courageous, consistent, powerful, or if you're just acting like it when things feel good. So the work is not just to change what you do. The real work is to become the kind of person who naturally does what needs to be done. Not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but because that's just who you are now. But most people don't want to do that part. They want the life, but not the internal transformation. They want the change, but not the identity shift. So they buy the planner, watch the videos, read the books, but inside they're still carrying the same beliefs, the same insecurities, the same fear of being seen. And so they get temporary results and then sabotage them, not because they're broken, but because their habits have outrun their identity. You've got to ask yourself, who am I being right now? Not what am I doing? Who am I being? Because your being drives your doing. And if you keep trying to do the right things while being the same old version of yourself, you're going to feel friction. You're going to feel misaligned. And you'll either burn out or give up. So instead of just asking, what do I want? Start asking, who must I become? Who must I become to hold this vision, to stay consistent when it's hard, to bounce back when I fall, to lead instead of follow, to live instead of survive? That version of you already exists. It's not some fantasy. It's already inside you, waiting to be activated. But it's buried under years of patterns, fear, old programming, and external labels. You've got to strip that away. You've got to make decisions based on who you want to become, not on who you've been. Every time you make a choice that's aligned with your higher identity, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, you chip away at the old version. You stop feeding the past and start feeding the future. This is why identity work is non-negotiable, because without it, you'll always feel like an imposter. You'll feel like you're chasing a life that doesn't belong to you. But when you embody the new identity, not just in your mind, but in your actions, in your energy, and how you speak and carry yourself, everything shifts. You stop forcing change and start living it. You stop trying to prove yourself and start expressing who you've already decided to become. Until you upgrade the identity, the results will always reset. At some point, you've got to make a decision, not just a wish, not just a hope, a real decision to stop choosing comfort over growth. Because whether you realize it or not, that's what's happening every single day. Every time you hit snooze instead of getting up early to pursue what matters. Every time you say silent when your voice was needed. Every time you say, maybe tomorrow, knowing full well that tomorrow is just another version of today if you don't change. You're not stuck because you lack options. You're stuck because you keep choosing what's easy, what's familiar, what doesn't threaten your current self-image. And you justify it by calling it being realistic when what you're really doing is playing small. People say they want change, but then they keep choosing the version of themselves that avoids discomfort. They say they want freedom, success, health, passion, purpose, but when faced with the choice between growth and comfort, they default to what they already know. Because growth requires you to feel. It requires you to stretch, to let go, to face uncertainty, to confront your own BS. And that's not convenient. That's not neat. That's not easy, but it's necessary. There is no evolution without discomfort. There is no transformation without tension. You don't get to become the strongest version of yourself by doing what's convenient. You do it by stepping into what's required. You've got to stop waiting for life to get easier. You've got to stop waiting for fear to disappear. You've got to stop hoping for the perfect moment when everything will feel just right. Because that moment never comes. The people who rise, the people who build extraordinary lives, they didn't do it because it was easy. They did it because they chose growth even when it hurt, even when it was messy, even when they were scared out of their minds. They didn't wait for confidence. They acted in spite of doubt. They didn't wait to stop being afraid. They moved with the fear until fear stopped leading the way. If you're tired of the cycle, if you're done waking up every day feeling like your soul is being put on pause, then this is the decision you must make. That from this moment forward, your comfort is no longer the priority. Growth is, expansion is, progress is. It won't always feel good. It won't always be clear, but it will be worth it. Because on the other side of that discomfort is the version of you that you've been chasing for years. The one who doesn't just talk about what they want, they live it. The one who walks with power, who speaks with certainty, who shows up fully, who stops negotiating with fear. And here's the truth. Every single time you choose growth, no matter how small the step, you are casting a vote for the person you are becoming. You are sending a message to your mind, to your body, to your spirit that says, this is who I am now. And that message compounds. It gains power. It builds momentum. Until one day you look back and realize the old version of you didn't just fade away, It was replaced. Replaced by the version that was buried under all the excuses, distractions, and comfort. Replaced by the one that was never stuck, just waiting for you to finally choose growth. Everything changes the moment you decide you're done living life on mute.